Welcome, everybody. So this is bittersweet for me. So this is the last review session that I'm going to do for AP Government, which is why I'm not showing my face, because I don't want you to see the tears and the sadness that is becoming of me because of this. Because believe it or not, I actually really do enjoy this time, and I enjoy looking at the stuff, and it also makes me reflect on missing the fact that, we had a lot of stuff that we could have done, and we could have done this in person, and it would have been so much better, but hey, whatever it is. So right now we're going to look at finishing up Unit 3 and social movements and minority rights, stuff like that. But what I want you to really look at, and I've been inundated with a lot of new information regarding COVID-19 and certain other things right now that has started to spark interest within me about where we're at in the world today and how that reflects back on your task within AP Government, what you're supposed to be looking at. So right now, although we have a lot of old evidence, we can go with Martin Luther King, whatnot, Selma March, there's a lot of stuff. There is a lot of new stuff that is coming about right now, and I do want you to focus on that. Pay attention to the news because, of course, you can use it in your AP exam. I think it'd be a wonderful piece of evidence for it. But there is a lot of stuff happening right now that I think is just good for you as a citizen to be looking at and to want to analyze yourself in this one. So we do see a picture here of a lady holding up that my constitutional rights are essential, and they're holding masks. We can see that, and they're protesting basically that, hey, it's my right to go to work. So when we think about it in that sense, whoa, it starts really getting a little crazy to see in this one. So let's roll with this. Let's start looking at things. We are going to do 3.10 to 3.12, I believe, or 13 on that one. So yesterday we did finish up with due process, and again, due process is the fact that you have a right to your constitutional rights. Especially we focused on a lot on the accused, that you do have rights. You're innocent until proven guilty at that point. So just do remember that one. But let's move on to social movements and equal protection. So today, the enduring understanding is the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, as well as other constitutional provisions, have been used to support the advancement of equality. Awesome on that one. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's just pull this up for everyone so we can see there, 14th Amendment. Let's go ahead and let's use cornell.edu because I think they're the best, even though I didn't even go to Cornell, so I can't even say that. So where are we at here? Constitutional provisions, you have Equal Protection Clause. So again, we know Section 1 here is what we used yesterday for a lot for due process. These are the different sections here, but Section 1 really is going to be the Equal Protection Clause, what we're looking at. So you do want to remember that for purposes of evidence-based, what you're going to use, especially in your essay, your argumentative essay, hopefully. Section 1, again, all persons are born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States, and the state wherein they reside, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. There you go, boom. So Section 1, 14th Amendment is that Equal Protection Clause for you there. And it's meant to really make sure that everyone is fair and equal. So if we do look down the essential knowledge here, we start seeing certain things, like we start looking at women's rights, LGBTQ rights, so forth in that one. One of the big pieces of evidence that they do want you to use from the past is the letter from Martin Luther King that was written from a Birmingham jail. So we definitely can take a look at that. Word of the wise, it is a very lengthy letter. Dr. Martin Luther King was very articulate in his writing, so he does say a lot in that one, but I definitely would look at it as a way to bridge, the past to reality in that one, because he does obviously go in and out being a reverend, goes in and out from religious tones to public tones, but the whole point is we're really talking about the reason why equality matters and why equality should be for everyone in that one. And you got to remember the civil rights movement. Time of the 1960s was a big era of change coming about for a lot of people in terms of making equality very overt, not just written, if you will, in the Constitution. People wanted to see it. I did like one of the recommendations here that, the pro-life movement, anti-abortion, that might be a good one you could see. So we have heard of many different things. So if you wanted to look at that, you definitely could. I would definitely, if you're going to cite for today, I would look at the stuff that is coming out of COVID-19 as a way to bridge that, because there is a lot of social uprising, social movements going to denounce COVID-19 as just a way to keep citizens at bay and to hold them accountable to the government instead of losing their will on that one. Very interesting, whether you believe it or not. It still is something that you're thinking about and having that thought. 3.11, government responses to social movements. Ooh, okay. So again, public policy promotes civil rights, is influenced by citizens, state interactions, and constitutional interpretation over time. Wonderful. Explain how the government has responded to social movements. Okay. One of the big ones here at 14th Amendment Protection Clause is the Brown versus Board of Education. So if we do go back, we look at the Plessy decision, we could cite that as an example for it if you wanted to use a piece of evidence. But there we go. So the case that came to be known as Brown versus Board of Education was actually the name given to 5 separate cases. Yeah, so a very kind of historical context in that one. A 3-judge panel heard the cases ruled in favor of the school boards. The plaintiffs then appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. When the case came before the Supreme Court in 1952, the court consolidated all 5 cases under the one name. Very interesting to know at that point. And so then let's get to you on this one so you can see it. May 31st, 1955, the justices handed down a plan for how it was to proceed. Desegregation was to proceed with all deliberate speed. I like that fact that it's in quotations. Although it would be many years before all segregated schools were to be desegregated. So because of the movement coming out, we saw schools now have to house everyone. So no longer could you have a separate brown school, white school, black school. You had to desegregate. One of the bigger cases, if you want to look in terms of SoCal, Mendez versus Westminster. Okay, this is a very, very big case that actually has a lot to do with our area in Santa Ana. And they had Mexican schools and they had white schools, and Mendez parents there were just upset that their kids were learning how to iron, how to fold clothes, do silly things like that. They wanted them to go to the white school, so they sent them there. And I actually got to meet the Mendez brother in person and shake his hand, give him a hug. It was really, really cool to hear his story and how he, as a kid, thought nothing of it. He just thought his parents were going to court all the time, but in reality, they were actually setting the tone, the change for everything. So that's another case you could cite. Very similar to Brown versus Board of Education. It just has a little more native feel in terms of being specific to us in SoCal at that one. 3.12 here, so if we move on with this, balancing minority and majority rights here. So that's a very interesting thought process to think about here. It's the court's interpretation of the U.S. Constitution is influenced by the composition of the court and citizen-state interactions. At times, it has restricted minority rights and at others protected them. So again, that we go back to Unit 2 and the point of the Supreme Court in general in terms of why it's so important for presidents to get justices that align with their political ideology, because it does shape future interactions down the road even after they leave office in terms of minority-majority rights on that one. We've kind of touched base on Brown versus Board of Education. So again, that, what was once a minority view, now it turns into a majority, all because you're holding up Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. Pretty good in that one there. Explain how the court has at times allowed the restriction of the civil rights of minority groups and at other times has protected those rights. So again, we can go back before even 13th Amendment. We can go way back before when, slavery is allowed. So it's very much a minority right or a minority viewpoint, and then at some point it switches to being a majority that, hey, no, slavery actually is incorrect at that point, even though nothing changed, right? The person didn't change. A slave became a free person that was still a person. It was just how it was looked at was very much minority majority if you look at it in that scope of things. Regardless, wrong, right, it was minority majority in that point in that one. But I think you kind of have a handle of that one in terms of what it looks like at that point. Affirmative action. So this is an interesting one. This is the way, right, if we know affirmative action, and actually just let me pull it up for us so that way we can all learn. There we go. Which one do we want to use? Let's go to cornelllaw.edu. Awesome. So definition for affirmative action: a set of procedures designed to eliminate unlawful discrimination amongst applicants, remedy the results of such prior discrimination, and prevent such discrimination in the future. Applicants may be seeking admission to an educational program or looking for employment. In modern American jurisprudence, it typically imposes remedies against discrimination on the basis of, at the very least, race, creed, color, and national origin. So affirmative action is very, very much a way to make up for the wrongs of it, if you will, at that point. I do like this piece of evidence. I think it's a really, really good one that we could use, and then I'll explain a little further. Executive Order 10925, the contractor will take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and that employees are treated during employment without regard to their race, creed, color, or national origin. So that might be a really nice piece of evidence that you could definitely use. Of course, it's been moved, but I would definitely look up that, cite that, because that's really when it kind of starts the wave. It's not a new thing. It's something that came about. You know, we definitely can say the Civil Rights era pushed that and made it more what it was, but it really is that 14th Amendment, Section 1, that gives affirmative action the open doors to start succeeding. And again, it's just a way to make up for the wrongs and to also make sure in the future that we are abiding by the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, Section 1, in that certain minority groups will need more access in order to be equitable, is really what it's saying. Now, of course, in a perfect world that you want to live in the future, that would not exist. Everyone's free and equal, so you don't need things like affirmative action to make the balance. But in times where we still are moving on from times of, if you, whatever you want to call it, inequality, stuff like that, affirmative action is the way to make sure that we prioritize the equality across the board in that one. So that's really what topic 3.13 is saying. Of course, there's cases here that you could cite in this one, so you can definitely look at those and have a gander. But that's really it for Unit 3. So Unit 3, though, if we do go back quickly, because I did finish relatively quick for us at this one, because it's not the hardest of a thing. I think this one is actually why it is a little more challenging for people, is because it requires more thinking in terms of what are you thinking about in terms of civil liberties and civil rights, and how does that equate to Unit 1, Unit 2, and all that stuff. So if we just quick recap, we do look again, we did see the Bill of Rights. We saw the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. We saw particular ones here, and we looked at freedom of speech, religion, press. Second Amendment, again, I do want to reiterate at this point, it really is coming down to your right to protect yourself, not as much the gun itself. So that's really where the Second Amendment, in terms of your argument, is coming from, is that it's your right to protect yourself. The gun is just a means to do that, versus the guns is the whole thing that the amendment is about. So that really, the way we looked at it in terms of analysis, is it's your right to protection at that point. We did talk about selective incorporation and due process, and how the fact, right, that you have those rights and they cannot be taken away from you, regardless if you're accused of something or not. You have due process. And that's really what separates our system from a lot of other systems, is that due process clause, which oftentimes does get overlooked at that point. Then we move further down to social movements, equal protection, and the fact that social movements are justifiable and are allowed in many different things. And when you think about it, social movements really do bring about change, not always in the best way, sometimes in a negative fashion, but it's your right as a citizen and as a human, we believe, in your civil liberties, that you have these universal, unalienable rights that you're bounded by. Not just, if you want to go religious, the creator, but just you as a human being here. You have these rights, and that what separates Western philosophy from Eastern philosophy, typically at that point. The last thing I do want to show you, a lot of people have been sending me this, and I've actually watched it. I'm not going to say if I believe it or not, but we're looking at today, Dr. Judy Makovitz, PhD. They're starting to expose the pandemic now that is coming about in terms of coronavirus. So you're seeing this social movement of blowback now, right? So, some people have asked, why is this not being squashed? Is it real? Is it not? But that's the whole point I think we can see here, which was a nice way to kind of finish Unit 3, is that it's really your right within our system to protest or to engage in social movements that may be against the federal government or the status quo at that point. And Dr. Judy Makovitz has due process, absolutely does, completely, regardless if you believe or not. That is your right, and as well, it's your right, if we go back up to 3.3, your First Amendment freedom of speech, right? It is your right to say things. So we do want to know that there are plenty of examples today that you could use. You don't just always have to go back to the history books to do it. That is it, guys. It has been an absolute pleasure doing this. It's really sparked a lot of thought in my mind, so I appreciate that. And I hope you've learned something. Again, train for 5, hashtag that, 30 minutes a day before May 11th, and you will be just fine. Plus, I cannot stress it enough. Please go watch Carrie Lamanna's videos. They are very good 5-minute breakdowns of each one. So you can definitely do 30 minutes a day and you will be off to the races, guys. Good luck with it, and I will touch base with you very soon.